His fingers traced along my spine, sending electricity through my body as he pressed closer behind me. I could feel Dylan's steady breath against my neck while Ryan's hands found my waist, their grip firm and certain. The interrogation room had become something entirely different, the harsh fluorescent lights now casting shadows that danced across our tangled forms. "Tell us what you need," Ryan murmured against my ear, his voice low and commanding. I was trapped between them, exactly where I wanted to be, my heart racing as their warmth surrounded me completely. Hey, if you're enjoying this intense start, smash that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what's got you hooked so far. The coffee had grown cold hours ago, forgotten on the metal table as I sat across from Officer Ryan Martinez. His dark eyes held mine with an intensity that made my pulse quicken, even as we discussed the break-in I'd witnessed 3 blocks from my apartment. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his angular features, but somehow he made even this sterile police station feel charged with electricity. "So, you saw 2 figures exit through the back window?" His pen hovered over the notepad, but his attention was entirely on me. The way he leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, made the space between us feel smaller, more intimate. I nodded, trying to focus on the facts rather than the way his uniform stretched across his broad shoulders. Around 11:30, they had flashlights, moved like they knew the layout. The door opened with a soft click, and Officer Dylan Clark stepped inside. Taller than Ryan, with sandy brown hair and eyes the color of storm clouds, he carried himself with the same quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from both men. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, though his gaze lingered on me longer than necessary. "Just wanted to check if our witness needed anything else." "Actually," Ryan said, his voice taking on a different tone, "Grace has been here for over 2 hours. Maybe we should make her more comfortable." He stood, his movement fluid and purposeful. "There's a break room down the hall. More private, better chairs." Dylan nodded, stepping aside to hold the door. "Good idea. We can finish up there." Something in their exchange made my skin prickle with awareness. This wasn't just about comfort or privacy. As I gathered my purse and followed them down the dimly lit corridor, I felt their presence behind me like a tangible force. The click of their boots on the linoleum seemed to match the rapid beating of my heart. The break room was smaller than I'd expected, with a worn couch pushed against one wall and a small table surrounded by mismatched chairs. Dylan flicked off, the overhead light leaving only the soft glow from a desk lamp in the corner. The shadows seemed to wrap around us, creating an atmosphere that was anything but professional. "Much better," Ryan said, settling onto the couch and patting the cushion beside him. "Please sit. You've had a long night." I hesitated for a moment, then sank down beside him, acutely aware of how the worn leather brought us closer together than the metal chairs had allowed. Dylan took the chair across from us, but even from there his presence seemed to fill the small space. "You know," Dylan began, his voice carrying a different quality now, softer but somehow more intense. "Cases like this can be traumatic for witnesses. The stress, the late hours, the unfamiliar environment." His eyes met mine. "How are you holding up, Grace?" The use of my name sent a shiver through me. "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice sounded breathless even to my own ears. Ryan's hand found my shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. "You're tense," he observed, his fingers beginning to work at the knots of stress I'd been carrying. "That's completely normal. What you witnessed tonight, it stays with you." His touch was electric, each movement of his fingers sending warmth radiating through my body. I tried to focus on his words, but the sensation was overwhelming. "I just want to help catch them," I whispered. "And you are helping," Dylan said, leaning forward in his chair. "But right now, you need to take care of yourself." He stood, moving behind the couch where I could feel his presence like heat at my back. "May I?" I nodded without fully understanding what I was agreeing to. But when his hands joined Ryan's, working at the tension in my shoulders and neck, all rational thought fled. 4 strong hands moved with practiced precision, finding every knot, every point of stress, melting it away with touches that seemed to ignite my very nerve endings. "Better?" Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper, his breath warm against my cheek. I could only manage a soft sound of agreement, my body relaxing into their touch despite the fire they were building within me. Or perhaps because of it. Dylan's fingers traced along the curve of my neck, while Ryan's hands had moved to my arms, stroking slowly from shoulder to wrist and back again. The dual sensation was intoxicating, making me feel as though I was floating even as I remained grounded by their array. "Touch." "Grace?" Dylan murmured, his voice carrying a question I understood without words. I turned to look at him over my shoulder, seeing my own desire reflected in his storm-gray eyes. "Yes," I breathed, not trusting my voice to say more. That single word seemed to unlock something between us. Ryan's hand cupped my face, turning me toward him as his lips found mine. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, but when I responded by pressing closer, it deepened into something hungry and consuming. Behind me, Dylan's hands continued their ministrations, now tracing patterns along my spine that made me arch into Ryan's embrace. The dual sensation of Ryan's mouth claiming mine while Dylan's touch set my skin ablaze was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. When Ryan finally pulled back, his breathing was as uneven as mine. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his thumb tracing my lower lip. Instead of answering with words, I reached back to thread my fingers through Dylan's hair, pulling him down until his lips found the sensitive spot where my neck met my shoulder. His sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know about his own state of desire. "We should move somewhere more comfortable," Dylan suggested, his voice rough with want. Ryan stood, extending his hand to help me up. "There's a private office upstairs," he said. "Completely secure, completely private." The walk to the office felt like a dream, their bodies flanking mine as we climbed the stairs. The anticipation built with each step until by the time Dylan unlocked the door and ushered us inside, I was trembling with need. The office was spartanly furnished but clean, with a large desk and a leather chair behind it. Dylan dimmed the lights to a soft glow while Ryan locked the door behind us. "Come here," Ryan said, his voice carrying that tone of quiet command that made my knees weak. I moved toward him, but before I could reach him, Dylan's arms encircled me from behind. His chest pressed against my back as his lips found my ear. "We're going to take care of you," he whispered, his hands settling on my hips. "Just tell us if you want us to stop." The word stop seemed impossible in that moment. Instead, I let my head fall back against his shoulder as Ryan stepped closer, his hands beginning to work at the buttons of my blouse with careful precision. Each button that came undone felt like a small surrender, and when the fabric finally fell away, I felt exposed in the most delicious way. Ryan's eyes darkened as he took in the sight of me, while Dylan's hands traced reverent patterns along my newly bared skin. "Beautiful," Ryan murmured, his fingertips ghosting over the curve of my collarbone. "Absolutely beautiful." Dylan's hands moved to the clasp of my bra, pausing for a moment. "May I?" "Please," I whispered, the word carrying all the desperate need I felt building within me. The garment fell away, and suddenly I was surrounded by their warmth, their touch, their whispered words of appreciation that made me feel like the most desired woman alive. Ryan's mouth found my skin, pressing kisses along the path his fingers had traced, while Dylan's hands explored the curve of my waist, the gentle swell of my hips. Every touch sent electricity through my system, building a heat that pooled low in my belly. "The desk," Dylan suggested, his voice tight with control that was clearly costing him effort to maintain. Ryan lifted me easily, setting me on the edge of the wooden surface, the cool wood a stark contrast to my heated skin. From this position, I was at the perfect height for both of them, and they took advantage of that fact immediately. Ryan positioned himself between my legs, his hands braced on either side of me as he claimed my mouth in another searing kiss. Behind him, Dylan's hands worked at the remaining barriers between us, each piece of clothing that disappeared making me feel more alive, more present in the moment. When Dylan's fingers found the sensitive spot at my inner thigh, I gasped into Ryan's mouth, my body responding instantly to the intimate touch. He traced slow, maddening circles that had me gripping Ryan's shoulders for support. "So responsive," Dylan observed, his voice filled with masculine satisfaction. "I wonder—" His words trailed off as his touch became more direct, more purposeful, finding the spot that made me cry out despite myself. Ryan swallowed the sound with his kiss, his own hands joining Dylan's in their exploration of my most sensitive places. The dual attention was overwhelming, building a pressure within me that felt like it might tear me apart. My body moved instinctively, seeking more of their touch, more of the incredible sensations they were creating. "Not yet," Ryan murmured against my lips when he felt how close I was to breaking apart. "We want to savor this." He pulled back just enough to begin pressing kisses along my throat, each one sending fresh waves of sensation through me. Dylan's touch never ceased, keeping me balanced on the knife's edge of release without quite pushing me over. "Please." I managed to gasp, not even sure what I was asking for. "Please what?" Dylan asked, his breath hot against my ear. I need more," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Ryan lifted his head to meet my gaze, his eyes dark with desire but also tenderness. "Then you'll have more," he promised. He stepped back, and for a moment I felt bereft without his warmth, but then I watched as both men began to shed their own clothing. The sight of them, strong and sure and clearly as affected by our encounter, as I was, made my mouth go dry with want. When they returned to me, skin against skin, the sensation was almost too much to bear. Ryan's hands gripped my thighs as he positioned himself while Dylan's mouth claimed mine, swallowing my sharp intake. of breath as Ryan joined with me in the most intimate way possible. The feeling of completeness was immediate and overwhelming. Every nerve ending seemed to come alive as Ryan began to move, setting a rhythm that had me clinging to both of them for anchor. Dylan's hands tangled in my hair, holding me steady as his kiss grew more demanding, more possessive. The combination of Ryan's steady rhythm and Dylan's consuming kiss created a perfect storm of sensation that threatened to sweep me away entirely. "That's it," Ryan encouraged, his voice strained with his own control. "Let go for us." But even as my body built toward that inevitable release, Dylan pulled back from our kiss, his eyes holding mine as his hands moved to his own need. "Open for me," he requested, his voice rough with desire. Understanding flooded through me, followed immediately by a wave of want so intense it left me breathless. I parted my lips for him, welcoming him as he stepped closer, creating a connection between all three of us that felt almost sacred in its intensity. The rhythm they established was perfect, complementary, each movement building on the last until I was lost in a haze of sensation and pleasure that seemed to go on forever. Ryan's steady presence filled me completely while Dylan's taste and scent surrounded me, claiming me in ways I'd never imagined possible. When the first wave of release finally crashed over me, it was with an intensity that stole my breath and made my vision blur at the edges. But they didn't stop, didn't slow, instead carrying me through each wave with touches and movements that seemed designed to prolong every second of pleasure. Ryan's control finally snapped as he felt my body contracting around him, his own release, following hard on the heels of mine with a groan that seemed torn from his very soul. Dylan followed moments later, his hands gripping my shoulders as he surrendered to the same force that had claimed us all. For long moments afterward, we remained connected, breathing hard in the aftermath of what we'd shared. When they finally, gently, separated from me, I felt the loss acutely, as though part of myself had gone with them. Dylan was the first to move, gathering the scattered pieces of my clothing and helping me dress with hands that were tender now rather than urgent. Ryan straightened his own uniform, but his eyes never left me, as though he was trying to memorize every detail of this moment. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, genuine concern in his voice. I nodded, though "all right" seemed an inadequate description for the profound shift I felt within myself. "More than all right," I managed. Dylan's hand cupped my cheek, his thumb brushing over my lips in a gesture that was both possessive and protective. "This stays between us," he said, though it sounded more like a promise than a demand. "Of course," I whispered. As they walked me back through the station and out to my car, I could feel the changed dynamic between us. What had started as a routine witness statement had become something none of us had expected, something that had altered the very air around us. "We'll need you to come back tomorrow," Ryan said as I reached my car, his hand resting on the open door, "to finalize your statement." "Tomorrow," I agreed, though we all knew the statement was the least important reason for my return. Dylan stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his warmth in the cool night air. "Drive safely," he said, but his eyes held promises of what tomorrow might bring. As I drove home through the empty streets, I found myself replaying every moment, every touch, every whispered word. What had happened between us felt like crossing a threshold from which there was no return, and rather than feeling uncertain about that fact, I felt exhilarated. The next evening couldn't come fast enough. When it did, I found myself back in that same break room, but this time there was no pretense of discussing the case. This time, when Ryan's hands found my shoulders and Dylan's lips found my neck, I knew exactly what I was walking into, and I walked into it gladly, ready to discover what other boundaries we might cross together. The case was eventually solved. The burglars caught thanks to security footage from a neighboring building. But my connection to Officers Martinez and Clark had evolved into something that had nothing to do with crime, and everything to do with the kind of chemistry that defies explanation. Some encounters change you forever, marking a before and after in your life that you can never quite go back from. That night in the police station was mine, the moment when I discovered that sometimes the most unexpected circumstances can lead to the most profound connections. What would you have done in that moment, stayed professional or given into? The undeniable chemistry? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story left you wanting more, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. The heat is just getting started.